Alright, so today we're going to check out some amazing new lightning weapons and skills added in Shadow of the Erdtree. I think that this is the most fun I ever had with the game ever since its release. No joke, it brings back the Thunder God build and makes it like 100 times cooler and 100 times stronger. We have a bunch of new weapons that look really awesome. We have a brand new incantation that's really strong. You get to zap over the battlefield, look really cool while doing it, and pretty much everybody gets blasted, or well, I guess in this case, shocked. So here's a quick overview of what this build can do. Basically, we're using weapons and some incantations that purely focus on lightning damage. Specifically, we have the Death Knight Great Axe and the Death Knight's Twin Axes, both coming with a very interesting unique skill called the Blink Bolt, which functions slightly differently depending on the weapon you choose. So in the case of the Great Axe, you transform into a bolt of lightning, charge straight up at a very high speed, and then the follow-up heavy is this really high leaping slash that also causes a lightning strike at the point of impact. Very strong, very high stagger, and also very good at dodging attacks, by the way, since you jump very much high up. In the case of the Twin Axes, it's about the same. You still transform into a bolt of lightning, but your follow-up heavy is basically a charged spinning slash that also deals lightning damage. They both look amazing, they both overwhelm enemies, and what I like most about them is that it makes you feel so fast that you can literally take any enemy by surprise. It made so many of the moments that were difficult with other builds much easier because of the charge up on that lightning bolt. But besides this, we also make use of Knight's Lightning Spear, another very strong incantation. I think that this is one of the strongest in the DLC and also one of the strongest compared to the base game. You deal tons of damage, it has pretty decent tracking, but more so it spawns like 6 extra adjacent lightning spears that further track into the target. And by the way, the stance damage on it is really great too, so you stun bosses in like 3 shots at most. So let's go over how you can find all of this stuff, because you can actually get both the lightning spear and the great axe from the same Scorpion River catacombs. So this is going to be after defeating Relana and entering the second area of the DLC. Once inside of the Scorpion catacombs, what you need is to basically follow the same path as I do, basically at the second level of the dungeon, because there's going to be a hidden path behind that frog that causes a death stacking debuff from afar. Right behind it, there's going to be a way to enter a secret doorway that also holds that lightning spear right in front of you. So just follow this path, eventually you're going to make it, and you're going to see it inside of a room with a bunch of these statue enemies, but once you defeat the imps, it's going to be yours. And if you push further in the same catacombs, you can eventually fight the Death Knight boss at the end of it, which is going to drop that Great Axe for you. It's also the one that it uses against you in combat, so you know it's going to be really good. But you can actually get the Twin Axes as well, actually earlier than that, from the Fog Rift catacombs, right here on the left side of Castle Enzis. Instead of going to the castle, you're going to take this path to the left side, eventually going downwards until at the end of it you're going to encounter this dungeon. And again, you need to go at the end of it, fight the knight enemy over there, and it's going to drop that for you. Now, once you get the weapons and the incantations, the other thing I highly recommend getting is the Death Knight armor set, specifically because this new DLC specific armor gives you boost to damage to your Ancient Dragon cult incantations, of which, yes, this new lightning spear is also part of, and it definitely gets some damage bonus from this. It's about like 10% from my testing, maybe a bit lower, but it's still nonetheless going to stack up on everything else that you have going on with this build. You're also going to use the Gravelstone Seal to further buff Dragon Cult incantations, so you do have a lot of extra lightning damage with this build. Obviously, you have some other options of armors as well. I covered them from the DLC, so you can check the strongest variants in the previous video that I covered before this and how to also find them. But you can definitely go with something that has a lot more defenses, for example, and build a slightly different setup that maybe uses endurance and maybe uses a lot more poise so that you don't get interrupted but also survive some of the trade-offs. But yeah, in the case of talismans, we are making use of Lightning Scorpion Charm, obviously, also Flux Canvas Talisman since we're using incantation damage. Also that Shard of Alexander because I do like that bolt attack on the Great Axe to deal damage, and it is definitely good. Plus, I'm using Radagon icon to shorten that spell cast duration for, in this case, the Lightning Spear. Not sure how much of a difference it makes. Sometimes it feels like it's just placebo, but it seems to do just fine. You definitely have other options too, like this has quite a bit of stagger, so we can implement the new Blade of Mercy talisman from the DLC. It definitely works and it raises your attack quite a bit, by about like 20% give or take. You can also use something like the Carrion Filigree Crest if you want to reduce some of that FP consumption on the weapon skills, but I don't think it's really needed. The FP consumption on these are very low regardless. Now, as far as stats and stat distribution goes, I went with a continuation of my Faith build. That is why you're seeing 60 points into it. And I'm doing that because the primary focus here is the Lightning Spear, while that Great Axe is actually just the adjacent bonus damage that I have, some extra attacks, plus the fact that it looks cool. But normally, if you focus a lot more on the Death Axe, you're going to want to actually go ahead and invest a lot more points into Strength, specifically since its scaling is a B in Strength, so you're going to increase that damage a lot. It's only D into Faith, and you only buff up the lightning damage. So it would deal a lot more damage if you actually focused it on that. And that's why eventually I'm going to build up to equal parts Strength and Faith, maybe slightly favoring Strength with this, but I do like the Lightning Spear for now. In the meantime, for that other weapon, which is the Twin Axe, this is a bit strange because it has C in Strength and C in Faith, but only D in Dex, which is annoying. This Dexterity is eventually going to be a dumb stat for us because Dexterity is going to buff up that lightning damage for us, and also the fact that it buffs up the weapon damage itself. So you're going to eventually put some points into it despite being only a D scaling. Besides this, 60 Vigor, about like 23 Mind, I found that to be plenty enough. Endurance 30, even though you don't need maybe as much, but I found it useful to essentially just spam these attacks, and that is basically it. Once you have this nailed down, it's a very easy setup to get into. Now, in terms of boss encounters and fight strategies, yeah, you're going to almost always start with a Lightning Spear because you get to unleash some very good damage, and you also get to deal that stance damage, as I said before. So what you can do immediately after is to use that bolt attack on the Great Axe, quickly charge towards the enemy and unleash a very powerful series of attacks, which in like 1-2 casts max is going to put them back to their knees. So really easy stagger, really high damage by that point, and also really fun to look at. No joke, this is like my favorite combo right now. Lightning Spear, Lightning Bolt, Jump Attack, it's GG's. You can also mix this up and maybe make use of the Twin Axes, especially against trash mobs. I found that especially some of the humanoid enemies, they tend to kind of overwhelm you if you leave room for them to move. So this is going to overwhelm them instead, and you're going to just spin slash against them. They don't really have a chance. And I found that humanoid enemies in particular are very easy to stagger for some reason with the Twin Axes. So overall, looking really good. But at the same time, you can also use that Lightning Bolt effect that transforms your character as a way to dodge attacks if you pull it off at the right moment. There were so many occasions when I really thought an attack was about to land and completely shatter me, but I was able to completely bypass that via the lightning like charge up. But at the same time, the opposite can also happen. You can definitely end up on the wrong side of an enemy chain attack. Anyway, that's about it with the build. Let me know down below if you liked it or if there's any other version of it that you're playing with. Definitely looking forward to seeing some of your ideas and suggestions as well. In the meantime, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.